Turn Up the Talk podcast, tackling mental health together.
Hey guys, welcome to Turn Up the Talk. You're joined by Pat Clifton, Lockie Drew Morris and Luca Moretti, brought to you by the Clovelly Hotel and Doyle's on the beach at Watson's Bay. Today we're joined by a pretty special guest, Carmen Greentree, who's just released her own book, A Dangerous Pursuit of Happiness. Carmen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm really great today. Thanks. Yeah.
How was the drive? So you're from Shell Harbour?
From Shell Harbour, yeah. So it was about an hour and a half drive up the coast, but it was no traffic. It was easy to find the place, and yeah.
Good to go.
Yeah,
so tell us a bit about your book, A Dangerous Pursuit of Happiness. You mentioned not long ago you released it.
Yeah, so it's only come out just over 3 weeks ago, and it's done really well so far. Lots of people have already given me feedback and saying that they've found that it's a very easy read. It's conversational. It's not too difficult to kind of get through. It's a page turner, which is nice to hear, and that people are finding that it's giving them a lot of hope and inspiration to go about their own healing journeys or to get over things that they might be feeling have kind of kept them stuck in a place in their lives. So yeah, it's been making me feel very relieved to have the story out, as well as very satisfied and fulfilled that I'm using what I went through as something that I can turn into something that has meaning. Yeah.
So before we get into kind of your story and what you talk about in the book, tell us a bit about yourself. So you're not quite professional, but nearly there on the tour with surfing.
Yeah.
You told us beforehand about how close you got and almost a few things kind of didn't go your way that probably should have. Talk to us about that growing up surfing and
yeah.
that
So
kind of scene.
I was a very, very competitive, determined, driven young girl, and perfectionist. So we all and having parents that also wanted to push you to achieve, and so it was only natural for me to just want to find something that I could channel all that energy into one direction. So I when I was 14 years old, I discovered surfing, and I took to it straight away, and I thought, great, well, this is where I can put all that energy. And I worked very, very, very hard straight away, just training, like learning, coaching, and everything became about surfing. And I did it for 7 years. And I ended up moving to the Gold Coast, because the Gold Coast is where you have all the sponsorships and the magazines and all the competitions. But most importantly, a lot of other pro surfers live there, which meant that I got to train with the best in the world. And therefore I got to sort of like osmosis learn what they were doing and try to keep up with them. So at one point I actually had the same coach as Stephanie Gilmore, and we coached every afternoon for a few months, just her and I and this coach. So that was that was amazing to because that was before she was a world champion, and I was a bit older than her. And so it's great looking back now and realizing that I was kind of just shy of her, and she ended up being 7-time world champion. So that was really cool.
What's the training like? So people talk a lot with swimming, like it's a very individual sport. How does that affect you with surfing?
So now they do things a lot different. Like my son, he's into the training. He goes to the Illawarra Sports High School for a surfing program. And now they do a lot more cross-training, which is amazing. It's way better for the sport. They do things like, they have a big, what do they call them? The jumping pits with the trampoline, like the aerial, that's right, aerial training. And they do lots of weights and gym. They have, so a lot of like out of the surf training, and then they also have a lot of the coaching in the surf. Whereas for me, I didn't really know any of that, and we didn't have any internet back then, and so therefore we couldn't learn from social media and what other people were doing. So for me, I just threw myself into what I thought was best, and that was just surf, and just like, I guess, winging it as I could. And then a little bit of, I guess, fitness training to sort of throw that in as well. But yeah, looking back, I think if I had a more holistic approach, cross-training with more stretching and rest and diet, it would have just been totally different.
Was anyone doing that at that time? Like, no one was really doing it all, that you just couldn't?
Just on the sand, practice on the sand, stand up on the sand.
Yeah, like
That's enough from you, mate.
Surfing expertise not very good there,
You stick to footy, would you?
No, I actually nearly went professional on the bodyboard down at T Reef, Tamarama Reef.
Oh god. So yeah, it just wasn't really a thing back then, was it?
not really, no.
That side of things.
No. I mean, there was definitely technical training in the surf. So as I progressed and went up the ladder a bit, and I had a couple of really good coaches on the Gold Coast, they'd get technical about where my feet were and where my hands were and where my knees were being bent and what I was supposed to do on the wave. But yeah, it was all just surf focused, wave focused, and nothing about that outside stuff. So yeah, that's definitely a big change I've noticed. Yeah, and the level of surfing is so much better now than it was when I was growing up. It's really, it's incredible.
Are people, like, given it's an individual sport, are people less inclined to sort of share tips and things like that, or did you find that everyone was sort of willing to help each other out?
Back then?
Yeah.
That wasn't my experience. No one was
Okay.
kind of talking about that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Back then. Yeah. And for me, I don't know if all girls feel this way, but I felt like the girls were very competitive.
Okay. Yeah.
So we weren't really we were friends, but then we weren't friends.
Yeah,
So it was definitely a rivalry.
Touching on the book, so on the front cover here, a female pro surfer's terrifying memoir of surviving abduction in India. We heard about your story through quite a few news articles that came out in recent weeks. I'd say it was probably aligned with the release of the book. Mm-hmm. So I'd assume from that it dives quite in depth of that. But tell us a bit about your early childhood growing up and how was it for you in regards to mental health? You mentioned before the show you struggled a little bit.
Yeah, so my brother was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy, and that's a disease that attacks the muscles and makes them stiff and tight and slowly kills you basically. And that was as you can imagine, like if you had a child, it would be an extremely stressful situation for any parent. And so my mum and dad, I watched my dad seem to be very depressed for a long time, and I watched my mum go through a lot of guilt, and they had a 24/7 job in first going down the rabbit hole of trying to find cures and trying to manage the condition, and then learning how to accept it, and then adapting this family life that they thought was going to be normal into this experience that was difficult and challenging 24/7. So I believe my experience is that I'm a highly sensitive person. I'm an intuitive person, an empathic person, and I didn't know that when I was a kid. I didn't know those terms and I didn't understand it, but because I was that without knowing, I was taking on so much of what was going on and kind of almost harbouring it and shouldering it, and maybe even blaming myself or feeling like there should be something I could do, like a sense of powerlessness. And you know, I could talk in much more depth about that as well, but that's kind of, I feel like looking right back into my early childhood, already back then, I had carried a weight, a burden. I was sad, I felt lonely, I felt isolated and left out because my parents were preoccupied, and also they you know, they have their own, I'm sure they have their own reasons, and they did the best they could, but they didn't like to sort of tell me what was going on, so I felt very left in the dark and confused. So I carried this, and it hurt, and I didn't know where to turn to. And when I was growing up, we didn't have counsellors and psychologists at school in the way that they do now. I think they have a better system now, but back then there wasn't a lot of support, or people didn't really know. Like depression was something that was looked upon as you're making it up. It's silly. Yeah. Even chronic fatigue, which I suffered from a little bit later on, which I might get to in a bit. But you know, these kinds of things are a bit taboo, a bit like, oh well, you know, don't say anything because you'll look silly, you'll look like you're just being weak. Yeah. So I just kept it all in, and it just built and built and built like this decay. And it got worse and worse, and I found it difficult to get close to people, have friendships, because I didn't want people to see how much pain I was in, because I was so afraid that I would be exposed. And I felt, I'm assuming right now actually that I must have been quite ashamed of how I was feeling, especially because I couldn't make sense of it. So that's a lot for a little girl to have to experience without having any help. So when I went into high school, and I definitely noticed that things did start to get a little bit better because you've got a bit more freedom in high school and you can kind of make a little bit of a life outside of the home. But surfing, when I found surfing, it was a huge relief, a huge channel for getting it all out, and also just being in the waves and paddling around and getting to be alone. And I do believe that the ocean has a very strong cleansing energy as well. Like, it just clears you, and all of that, I definitely felt like it helped me survive through all of that. Yeah.
And then moving forward, you had quite a traumatic experience in India. If you don't mind, could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I really hope that people can learn what not to do from my story as well. So surfing masked this pain for a long time, and it gave me hope. So it was kind of like a segue for a while. And then in Hawaii, when I was at that make or break point where I could have made it onto the WCT, so I was booked in for this event, and it was in Hawaii. It was the last event, and my ranking was 23rd in the world at the time. And if I had have done really well in this event, I could have made the CT, which would have led to more money, more sponsorship, and the ability to continue on this path.
Yeah.
But because when I got to the contest, they told me that for some reason unexplained, that I was not in the competition and that I was only a reserve. That was a moment where I was completely shattered and heartbroken, because I couldn't compete and therefore I couldn't get those points, and I didn't even get to try for my chance on the tour. And so I didn't want to go through another year. I just felt like I didn't have it in me, because that's when the chronic fatigue started to come into the picture as well. So depression, chronic fatigue, feeling like I had no more direction, no more purpose, and nothing else in my life. I didn't really feel like I valued friendships or relationships because I was so afraid of them. And I didn't realize that back then, that I was so afraid of them because of that intimacy. Didn't want people to see me. So I had nothing, absolutely nothing left. And I went to India thinking that if I could study with someone like the Dalai Lama, I was booked in to study with him in a place called Dharamsala, which is where he lives. He was running a course where you can learn the art of compassion and meditation and healing. I thought, well, I'd heard from a friend that the Eastern way of philosophy and psychology has something a little bit more special maybe than what we've known. Plus, I'd already tried everything here and nothing really was working that well. So off I did. I packed like one backpack, sold everything that I didn't need, and booked a ticket and thought, I'm just going to go to India. I'm not coming back until I want to, and I'm going to just study in ashrams, and I'm going to do some volunteer work at orphanages and different type of like yoga practice, like ashrams and things like that. So I thought, right, I'll just lose myself in that and work it all out, and then maybe one day I'll come back and I'll have something to give back to everyone else when I've worked it out for myself. So that's what got me to India. But then when I got to India, everything derailed completely. I ended up going to a tourist agency that was a non-government tourist agency, even though I was told they were a government tourist agency. And I was warned to make sure I went to one. So I had my mind set on going to a legitimate one, but it turns out that they were running scams. And they scammed me into going to a place called Kashmir, which was way, way, way off the beaten track of where I wanted to go. And that's where I ended up getting abducted. And I never left Kashmir until I got rescued by the police.
Wow. So how long were you abducted for?
So there was a family involved, and the oldest brother was the main perpetrator. That was kind of like, he was the one that took my tickets, took my passport, took my bank cards, and was basically in charge of everything. And at that time, he became in charge of me. And I was there with him for 2 months. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Were they asking for what was there a ransom behind it? Was there? It's hard to get behind the mind of someone like that. All I know is that my experience of it was that he wanted to take everything he could. He wanted to take my body. He wanted to take my money. He wanted to take everything that he could get from my parents. He wanted to take I felt like he just wanted to suck my soul. Yeah, he just wanted to take everything he could. And he didn't care. And I challenged him on it, and he said he didn't care.
Was there much communication throughout the ordeal, like with the perpetrator, or was it sort of like you spoke to him, you said you challenged him? Like,
I challenged him at first, and then I got whacked across the face, like hit physically with his hand across my face a few times, and then I realised that I didn't want to see a worse side of him. So then I learned about this thing actually not that long ago. So we've got different types of responses in stress. We've got like a fight or flight and freeze, but there's actually a fourth F that I've just discovered, and this is one that is not very talked about very often, and I think that we do need to build more awareness of this because it's not easily understood and it can be misunderstood, but it's called fawning. And fawning is when you're in a situation where you fear for your life so much that you start to try to please your perpetrator, you start to try to placate them, you start to try to make them happy, so that you can actually keep the situation in a safe state, like the safest state, if that makes sense. So even if you are getting raped or sexually abused, even if you are getting any type of abuse or subjugation or control, that you can keep it at a survivable level rather than a possibly like getting, well, for me, I actually believed that I might have got murdered. So fawning, one of the reasons why I wanted to write my book was because I couldn't go through with to testify. I had 2 opportunities to testify against him, and well, a couple of them, and to get them thrown in jail, but I couldn't do it because when I was only 22 at the time, and I didn't understand any of this, and I hadn't unpacked any of this, but I was so frightened that I would be misunderstood, and that if people saw that I was trying to make him happy, or I was trying to I was doing certain behaviours in order to survive that might look like I was just having a good time.
Yeah.
I was so frightened that I would be accused of lying, or it wasn't that bad. And so, yeah, now I'm brave enough to come out and say it. And if someone challenges me and says, well, you're lying, I can say, that's fine. You think that? That's fine.
Yeah.
Because I understand what fawning is now. I understand why I did the things that I did, and they were survival mechanisms.
I don't think anyone can really have an opinion on something as big as that without going through that experience, you know.
The trolls on the internet think that they have the right to have an opinion on that.
I could imagine. And it's to think people can kind of have their say on it, comment on it when you've been through nothing like that is crazy. But thank you for opening up and sharing that. I mean, that would have been crazy, especially you were going there to seek peace and kind of happiness within yourself, and then to endure that. I mean, you mentioned you thought you wouldn't make it out alive at one stage.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Wow.
I truly didn't believe I was ever getting off that boat, and I did believe that I was going to die on that boat, whether it was at the hands of him or whether I was just going to die there. But I just felt that I wasn't getting off.
With the fawning, was it something that you spoke about, it clicked when you learned it a few years ago, or thinking back, did you know what you were doing at the time with your actions, or was it something that just clicked a few years ago?
I think
like,
it
that
was
what I was
something.
doing?
I don't think it was anything I thought about. I literally think it was a survival mechanism that kicked in and just took over. Like, it was something that I just, Like it was like my way. Like I said, you got flight, fight, freeze, or fawn, and I think that these are often unconscious ways that we react, and we we fall into one of those categories depending on the situation. So I would say it was just my default way of responding in that situation, and so it was only looking back when I learnt the term that I was reading it in great detail. I was like, oh, there's a name for what I was doing, because I couldn't even, like, before I got that term and understood what it meant, I would even wonder myself, what was all that about? And now I can go, oh, that was a survival mechanism. That makes sense now. And that helped me release a lot of shame, because I personally had shame as well. I blamed myself that I'd done something wrong for a long time, and that I was even confused. So just to get to feel like I didn't have to be ashamed of the way that I responded. That's something that I really hope that more and more people can become aware of, because people are probably doing it right now and they don't even know it. They might be in a toxic or abusive situation, and right now with the COVID, I've heard that domestic violence and sexual abuse and drug and alcohol abuse, it's gone up. And so I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to this right now that might be in situations where they might not even realise that that's what they're doing. They're trying to placate, they're trying to please, they're trying to keep the peace. But what you don't realise is that you almost trick yourself into believing that it's okay situation, because that's another part of the coping mechanism, is so that you can keep sane as well and you can survive. But you don't realise that your whole nervous system is getting constantly flooded with these huge cortisol and stress hormones, and that over time it's going to lead to really bad outcomes health-wise and mentally and psychologically, and it can take a while to recover from that. You really got to find the right therapist, someone that is really genuine, that really is there for the right reasons, and that can really understand what these types of traumas are all about. Because also in my personal journey of recovery, part of the reasons why it took me 15, 16 years, and still right to this day, I'm still even recovering more and more. It's like I'll find a little piece and I'll go, I've got to work on that. It's taken me this long because especially in the beginning part of my journey, a lot of the psychologists and therapists that I went to, look, well-meaning, I'm sure, really lovely people, but I guess they didn't really sort of have the knowledge and the wisdom to the extent that I do now. If that makes sense.
No, definitely. You spoke about, with one of the book articles, existing as a shell. Could you just dive into that a bit?
Well, so Kashmir, I was in Kashmir and it was on a houseboat. And when I was on this boat with this family, and I'd attempted to escape. Like, I wanted to just get out of this place, and like for a long time I thought, look, some really bad stuff's happened, and if I can just get to this is how crazy my mindset was, like, and I could go so deep into this, but I was just thinking, if I can just get on that bus to Dharamsala and get to the Dalai Lama, everything's going to be all right. And this is already after I'd been raped. I was just thinking, you know what, I could just get on that bus and I'll forget it like it never happened. I'll be right, like I'm tough, whatever. And I had this mindset of wanting to get off. I just wanted to get out. I just wanted to get my money back. I wanted to get my passports. I wanted to get my ticket. I just wanted to be able to get on that bus and get out of there. And so I just tried everything I could think of to get on that bus, every angle, what I'm trying to say is I exhausted all of these options. And then once I felt like I was literally out and dry of options, then the feeling started to sink in pretty quickly that, well, that's it then. No one's coming to get me because mum and dad and all my friends think she's sold all her stuff. She's gone. She's not come back. She's told us that she's off on a pilgrimage, and I said it could be years. I said goodbye to everyone. And so I'm like, well, no one's coming to get me. Like, that's it. And I thought, well, this is not my life anymore, because like that was one of the hardest things was because freedom was always a big deal for me. I felt like a free spirit. And one of the pieces that I've just realised over like releasing my book over the last few weeks, I realised that yeah, he took everything, but I also felt like he took my whole life. It wasn't just being raped. It wasn't just having all my money stolen. It was like he just took my whole life, and there was nothing left except for just existing there. So when I say existing as a shell, it's like I got to a point where I went, well, there's no point in me being here anymore. So off I went, like out of body, gone, just out, done. I'm not here anymore. So I just existed as a shell. Yeah.
I think, sorry, talking to you now, I think that's far from the point now. Like talking to you, how brave you are, how strong you are from that experience. I think that's far from the fact now. I think you've done really well to bounce back.
Thank you. Yeah. And that's why I'm doing this, because I want to be proof that it's possible to feel really good. Like I'm just gonna be honest. I feel really fulfilled, really happy, healthy, well. I have beautiful children, and I have a good life. And it's possible to create that even after all of that. So I just hope that people can see that they can do that too.
It's awesome. It's amazing.
When you say the police found you, when they found you, did you, obviously I'd say there would be a bit of relief, but did you still just feel that kind of in your shell, like even though the experience itself is over, it's far from over in regards to trauma?
There wasn't, there might have been some relief, but that's not really the way I feel I remembered it. It was like, I would say a light turned back on. So it was like, when I said out of body, switched off, not here. It was like a light, when I knew that I was going to get rescued, a light turned on, and it was like, oh, it's worth checking back in now because I have an out. Yeah. And then I actually felt the most afraid out of any other time that I felt, because I was absolutely petrified that if I would get caught trying to escape, that I would see that really bad side of this person. And that was my worst nightmare. Like, I would have rather been a shell on that boat for the rest of my life until I died one day than to possibly see that side. I just didn't know what he was capable of, and I don't know, So that day when I got rescued, I was absolutely shaking in my bones and my soul all the way until I finally got to the embassy in Delhi, and that took a plane trip, and it also took a taxi ride, and it wasn't until the big boom gates actually closed and locked behind me that's when I felt relief. I was like, okay, I am pretty certain now that I'm safe. But then even still, in saying that, it wasn't until I was on the plane coming home, like that takeoff, when you're up in the air, I was like, oh, okay, like that's the end of that. But then yes, there was that knowing that I had just gone through something that was definitely going to change my life for the rest of my life. And I had no idea at that point how long it was going to take to get to where I am today. Yeah. Can
you talk us through your healing process of that?
Yeah. There's so many layers and levels to that, but some of the highlights, I guess you could, for lack of a better term, was that shame. Dealing with shame was powerful, because if you have shame about what's happened, and you feel like you're a victim and you feel like you're at fault, then you're not going to heal. And so for me, realizing that I felt shamed and that I didn't have to feel shamed, and that it wasn't my fault, that I wasn't, like, I can be accountable and responsible now for my healing and for what's happened, but I don't have to be accountable and responsible for what they did to me. So that was one of the most powerful shifts in my healing journey. And I would say, what else? it's been very slow and gradual. So for a very, very long time, I actually thought I was fine. Like I really, truly thought, yeah, I'm fine. But then I realized I was numb.
Yep.
And so that was another powerful turning point, was to realize that I do have trauma, and that that is actually affecting my life, and I didn't realize it. So to be able to realize that I'm numb and that I have to feel and have to get in there and unpack it and get rid of it, then that improved my life. And I've so one of the most powerful techniques for me that I've used in my healing journey is a technique that actually removes the trauma from the cells in the body. So our actual cells store our emotions, and it's quite fascinating. So when you actually start to feel, say, like if I wanted to feel, if I was angry, if I actually got out of my head and just went, right, where is this anger in my body? Where do I feel it the strongest? Then if you're connected to the body and you're sensitive enough, which might be a hurdle for some people, but you can get there. You can feel like whether it's in the heart or the knee or wherever it might be, but then you can actually realize that it's stuck there. So then as you give yourself permission to feel it and to actually love it and to make it okay and to listen to it and talk to it, then most of the time that actually starts to help move it through. I kind of feel like it gets stuck if we don't give it attention, but when we start to give it the right attention, like loving attention, it'll start to move through the body. But then there'll be another layer and another layer and another layer, and then after a while it's like you're melting away all that trapped stress. Like that must be the cortisol and just everything that we hold on to. You can just melt it that way. So it actually, what I'm trying to say is, so when you get it out of the cells stop sending a vibration of that emotion. So if it's anger and your cells are vibrating constantly at anger, even if you think you're having a great day and it's all happy, if you have regular cellular vibrating of anger, you're going to attract situations into your life that's a vibrational match to that anger. So you have to release it from the body and from the cells so that the vibration of the cells can go back to homeostasis, which is in our natural free-flowing energy. It's actually love. It's actually just peace and ease and flow. Then we can actually find that flow in life and therefore be vibrating at that. So therefore we attract more of that, and then we take off and our life just gets better and better and better.
It's a great insight, because we had, Josh Dugan, the Sharks player, and we had him on last year, and he spoke about he started doing that a lot with how he was feeling throughout the day in terms of taking energy from people. So he gave the example, I think he was driving, and someone cut him off. And he goes, you have they
didn't say thanks.
Yeah, they didn't say thanks, yeah. So you have a really good opportunity to take that negative energy on and go, okay, well, that's going to piss me off for the day. Or you just go, okay, whatever, stuff happens. So that's a great insight. Just back to the healing, something that we all found just admirable was you spoke about the perpetrator, and you said that you have nothing but compassion and sadness for them. I mean, that is quite astonishing and admirable for someone in your position to say that. Do you feel that, did that come from the healing?
I felt that straight away. I never harboured any anger towards any of them. I felt shocked. I felt like I was in disbelief that a human could treat another human in that way. But I just felt deeply sad that a human could actually be that way. To me, this is the way I see life. We are born these beautiful little babies that if those babies are loved and nurtured in the right environment and have all the needs met and given the chance to find their true individual selves and blossom, they're not going to run around being a rapist or a murderer or a thief. They're not going to do that. They're going to be wanting to just be a good person. So something really must have went really wrong for this group of people, like people like this, to be this way, you know. And I believe that they've suffered from traumas. They've probably been extremely poor. Maybe it's been passed down from generations. I mean, they didn't live in a very nice place. I don't know. I don't feel like I have the kind of heart that can go to a place where I don't like the feeling of hate. It just doesn't work for me. It doesn't feel right, you know. I sort of feel like at the end of the day, we all come from the same place. We're all going to the same place.
You mentioned how traumatic it was, and for people listening who have gone through a physical, emotional, mental kind of abusive situation, you did mention what helped you in your healing. If you could just kind of give 3, say, tips or advice of what really helped you, what would they be?
The first thing that pops into my mind is that I would choose really carefully as to who you talk to, because I made a lot of mistakes choosing the wrong people to open up to. And so I would work on loving yourself first enough to know how to choose someone that feels safe and loving to start the healing journey. Like treat it sacred.
Yeah.
So if you're holding stuff in and you are afraid to heal it, you are afraid to go there and share it, then hold that sacred, because that is important to you. And then love yourself enough to go, right, well, I will share it, I will look for healing, but I'll give myself the permission to find someone that I truly believe is being loving and unconditionally accepting and safe. So that's the first thing I'd do. Secondly, I would definitely like to highlight that if someone does something, like law of attraction's pretty popular, and I think there's a few things that go around in the new age spiritual circles where it can be a little dangerous, and it's like, oh, well, you caused that to happen to you because you vibrated at that, and so therefore you get what you deserve and it's your fault. And look, I don't even want to entertain whether that's right or wrong. I would just like to say that if someone does something to you, like stabs you or robs you or rapes you, they have to be accountable for their actions. That's not okay. It's just give yourself permission to acknowledge that it doesn't matter what you were vibrating at, whether you were going through like the Epstein girls, you know, they were vulnerable girls. Doesn't matter if they were vulnerable girls. It's not their fault that they were vulnerable. Yeah. Stop shaming the victim and saying that, well, they deserved that because they were already of a low vibration. Just make it very clear in your mind that just because you're going through a tough time does not mean you deserve to have bad things happen to you. And so therefore, just being able to separate the two and going, okay, I'm responsible and accountable for my healing and myself now, but I'm not responsible and accountable for what other people do to me. They're responsible and accountable for that. So that takes a lot of the shame away and gives a lot of the compassion and love back to, because it was almost like I had more compassion for them than myself initially. So that was something that I would like to say is have compassion for yourself. Make sure that that's a first. And then the last tip I would probably say is make whatever give yourself space to feel. And it might be really scary and it might be really hard and you might think that you're going to die if you feel the feelings that you feel, but it won't actually hurt you to feel your feelings. And when you feel, so sometimes we might think, and I've thought this and I believe a lot of people think this, is if you feel your rage or hurt or pain, that it's going to be overwhelming or overbearing and it's going to make you want to do something that you're going to regret. Well, the thing is, if you don't feel it, you're going to create a blockage. So it's almost like a mind trick. It's like the opposite happens. If you actually give yourself permission to fully feel that emotion, you actually if you can do it with love and make it safe and make it okay and don't make it wrong, even if like you start to think, oh, well, I hate that person, I want to do this and I want to do that, you're less likely to actually go and do it because you're like, oh, I'm just going to give myself permission to make that okay and just validate that I feel that way, and then it'll start to soften and move through you. So just letting yourself move through those emotions rather than trying to push those emotions away, because that's where we get into trouble. And that's where people probably end up wanting to kill themselves, because they push away their feelings because they probably think that it's not tough to feel the way that they feel, it's probably not manly, or it's probably, or girls might think it's not polite to be angry, but all of that's just crap. We're human beings, and our emotions range from bliss, nirvana, joy, ecstasy, all the way down to depression, grief, sadness, and they're all normal, and they're all healthy, and they're all part of males' or females' experiences. It doesn't matter what colour your skin is. That's actually our guidance system. And when we often perceive negative emotions as like negative because they're called negative emotions, but I don't look at them as bad. I look at them as, oh, I'm feeling really pissed off today. Right, well, what is it trying to tell me? And then I like talk to it, and then I'll find that, well, it's trying to tell me that I really want this and I don't want that, and that's okay. And so now I'm just gonna, I've just learned about something, and so it's actually a good thing that I felt pissed off.
Yeah.
So that's, I hope that makes sense, but yeah.
No, 100%. So your book, A Dangerous Pursuit of Happiness, for those that can see. So tell us a bit about where we could find that online, in stores.
I'm hoping to get it in Dimmicks really soon, but you can order it through Dimmicks, but you can order it through my website, which is carmengreentree.com. And on the website, it's got the links for the book depository. And the reason why I've got it on the book depository is because they do free worldwide shipping.
Yeah, okay.
But it does pay to go onto some of the other sites like Amazon or the Booktopia, because every now and then there's different specials as well. So you just it pays to just sort of have a look at the different sites and see which one's the best value at the time.
Yeah. And can you get that link through your Instagram or something like that?
It's on the website, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and yeah.
Just at Carmen Greentree?
carmengreentree.com.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing that story. I mean, I think I speak on behalf of the boys. That was amazing. That was inspirational, and for you to talk so comfortably about that topic, I mean, you've come a long way, obviously. So congratulations, and thank you very much for sharing that.
Yeah, it's just my pleasure, and thank you, boys, because you're giving me the platform to actually reach as many people to hear my message, and that's what it's all about.
Very strong message as well.
Yeah.
So thank you both.
So make sure to check out her book, and once again, thanks to the Chloe Hotel and Doyle's on the beach down at Watson's Bay. Get all your seafood sorted.
Get the sponsor name right.
And thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Turn Up the Talk podcast, tackling mental health together.